Mob Talk Radio with your host, Jeff Canarsie.
I'm going to tell you something. If you two ever bother me again the rest of my life, I ain't giving up anything. I can't. There's good friends of mine out there fucking say. Well, he's the boy, you have to do it first. That's why I said to you before, you don't understand what the man says. The husband means that the boss is your boss.
To get into a segment that we're going to do for the next probably 2 weeks. And I'm not going to get into a whole bunch of it today, but I am going to get on to something that happened to me doing Mob Talk Radio. Because of this subject, I have to be very careful because there was litigation over this, so I have to be very careful what I go through. But I already know, before I even say anything, that the losers and the haters and the stalkers are going to say that I'm inventing this and that somehow I believe these things happened, but they really didn't. But the truth is they all did. Every single thing that I'm going to discuss in the next couple of weeks did happen. There's witnesses to it. There's court paperwork to it. There's photos. There's everything. And there is an attorney who was involved in this as well. And everything that I'm about to discuss with you is real and it's serious stuff. And I personally don't give a fuck who believes me, who doesn't. There are content creators, like I said, who have gone through some tough stuff. They've dealt with losers and internet weirdos and to some extreme levels. But the reality is I went through similar things a decade before them. And that still continue to this day. And it's not to say that I went through more, I went through less. But I was the first one to go through serious crap, and we're talking street level shit. And so this is titled, You're in the Mafia in the Albanian Hit. And don't let the title fool you. While some hit teams are proficient, like Murder Incorporated, the bunch that attempted to kill me and my attorney at the time apparently missed the fucking memo on how to carry out a successful fucking hit. But you might need some background. So for months, my attorney had been posting wanted posters on Facebook regarding a mob informant. And this informant was refusing to answer legal paperwork in a lawsuit that we had filed against him in the Southern District of New York. And not only did this informant deny getting served paperwork, but he was refusing to answer a sworn deposition ordered by the federal courts. And the posters, I admit, wanted dog, stuff like that. They showed a photo of the said informant with the words wanted across the top, followed by an insinuation that he was a coward and running from a lawsuit, which is exactly how you piss off a former mob guy. And while it probably was not the best way of getting his attention, it worked. He was irate. It made him look bad in court. It made him look bad in the court of public opinion, which by its design was meant to push him out into the light. The Gotti family were hammering him. I was hammering him. And now an attorney was wiping his name and shit all across social media. And you can imagine how somebody might react to that, especially if they're a fucking sociopath. In a prior court appearance with myself and my lawyer, we were there for pre-trial stuff or pre-lawsuit stuff. And I'll never forget, this is the initial conference. And so you go in there and the attorneys are arguing over what's admissible. Let's set a date for a deposition. You know, all the typical legalese of it all. And what's interesting is I'm sitting in a federal court next to my lawyer. Across from me is the mob rat and his attorney. And there's a nice looking judge, an older Italian guy sitting behind the bench. And my attorney's explaining what this is about, what happened, why we need to force the deposition. His attorney is saying it's all nonsense, it's all bullshit, blah, 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 blah. And so they're kind of but they're like kind of doing their back and forth. I'm just sitting there twiddling my fucking thumbs, to be honest with you. Because it's just an initial conference. You get it over with, you leave, whatever, and then you set another court date. But this informant stood up and started screaming. I shit you not. And I have a copy of the tapes. And I have the transcript. So anybody that says this isn't true, it is. I have all of that stuff. I got it from the courts. The problem is I have got to get a lawyer other than my lawyer at the time to view that and to listen to it to make sure I'm not breaking any confidentiality. Okay, so that's why I have not put it out, but it's fucking hilarious. I would love to play it on this show. It's hilarious. You got a guy from Queens, New York screaming, it's just fucking every other word's the fucking F word. And I'm sitting there like, holy shit. So I'm sitting there, and this informant stands up, and he just starts screaming all kinds of shit. This lawyer's a junkie, he's a drug addict, blah, 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 blah. He's just making up shit as he goes along. And as his lawyer began sort of consulting the judge, trying to get him to be quiet, he jumps up again from his seat, and he began to spew some very hilarious and interesting things. And I look at the judge's eyes open wide as this informant begins to levy accusations left and right. My lawyer, according to this informant, was a junkie, a drunk who worked directly for John Gotti Jr. That was his stance. Think of this poor judge. It's a defamation lawsuit, whatever. And this judge all of a sudden has now heard John Gotti Jr.'s name, the Gotti family mentioned. Then he says that my lawyer is all mobbed up. He then looks at me, and his face is beat red. Keep in mind, this is the guy that killed people. His face is beat red. He looks right at me and points at me and says, almost spitting like a cobra. He tells the judge presiding over this case that I was a member of the Mafia, an inducted member of the Genovese crime family, but I was also an associate of the Philadelphia Mafia and worked directly for Joey Merlino. Now, if you could have seen my face, I'm just sitting there like, thank God the press wasn't there, because that would have been all over the fucking papers the next day. He's in the Genovese crime family. I mean, it would have been everywhere, because that's what the papers do. They lie. And I'm just sitting there like, what the fuck? I can't believe he just said this shit. And I don't know what point the informant was trying to prove, but the look on the judge's face said it all. He's like, what the fuck have I just walked into? So the lawyers would continue going back and forth over protocol and evidence. And finally, the judge, fed up with everything, asks me, he looks at me and, says, do you have anything that you want to say? Like everybody else here is like ranting and raving. Is there anything you want to say? I looked and said, no, Your Honor, the Colgate Comedy Hour just ended. And he started laughing. And we ended up leaving court. And I knew this informant was fucking psychotic angry. He truly believed I was involved in organized crime. But he got a surprise when he went outside, because that borderline stalker weirdo Fag Perosa, who worked for the Gottis for a long time, confronted him. And that's where that little video came out of him confronting the informant. Oh, are you on welfare? Do you get food stamps? Listen, that kid would have never done that shit if the cops weren't around. But still, and that only exacerbated the informant. So if you fast forward a few months later, my attorney began his assimilation of this informant all over social media. Wanted, rabid dog, wanted, coward. And the informant wasn't happy, and he let it be known he was not amused. He would try to cherry pick my attorney by saying, oh, I know your friends. I know what schools you went to. I know where you live. All the stupid little tactics that they try to scare you. It was a threat. Don't get me wrong. It was a threat, but one of those threats of, I could do something if I wanted. I know a lot of people, but I won't. And that sort of began a series of strange events that would happen until the fateful day in Park Slope, Brooklyn. Every once in a while, my attorney would call me and start talking about cars following him. And he's not a paranoid guy. He's a fucking attorney, but he knew something was up. And one of the instances that he told me about was somebody knocking on his door of his mother's house. He was coming down the street and he saw someone he didn't recognize banging on his mom's door. And as he got closer, the person turned and ran away and got into a car and took off. And my attorney would drive around the block and Uh, he would drive up the block after the car and just couldn't keep up with them. They were just speeding. And the second event would be very similar. My attorney was driving in his neighborhood and somebody began to follow him. He'd turn right, they'd turn right. He'd go left, they'd go left. He'd speed up and lose them. He would speed up to lose them, but they would speed up too, riding his bumper. And he had told me this went on close to 10 minutes before he gunned it and lost him. It could have been a coincidence, right? But as we would find out, it really wasn't. So a couple of weeks went by, and things were still pretty tense, and the informant was still apparently pissed off. And in reality, we knew who we were dealing with, but we didn't think he would be stupid enough to do anything himself, right? And we always sort of figured that if he tried anything, he'd hire Albanians to do it. We always knew that. And the reason for that was basic. Italians, would have nothing to do with an informant whatsoever, but even young Italians who didn't know any better stayed away from the guy. Albanians, on the other hand, loved this informant for some reason. And there's your clue to who it is. They're willing to do anything for him. And a lot of it is misguided energy. And listen, I knew and know a guy that's the head of the Albanian mob here in New York. I know him very well. And we've been friends for a long time. And I went to ask him why the Albanians valued anybody like this guy, especially when you consider it was Albanians who worshiped JohnGotti. And he basically told me, he says, listen, it's not the older generation, it's the young kids who love this informant because they don't know any better and they're looking to play gangster. The older, wiser men would never associate with this guy on any level in New York City. And he felt that this informant, if he did anything or was going to do anything, he was going to hire some young Albanian dipshits looking to make the name for themselves on behalf of this rat. And this is what happened. My attorney calls me one day and says, hey, let's go grab a lunch, have a smoke. All right, not a problem. Let's talk some business, have a cigar, eat some lunch, and just kind of hang out. So my attorney picks me up. We went from Manhattan to Queens to meet some people first. And afterwards, he's like, fuck it, let's go to Park Slope. And he's like, you want to get something to eat? And I was like, yeah, fine. So we end up parking and entering a Turkish restaurant. First mistake. We ended up going in, we sat down, and we began to order. And we were seated probably 20 feet from the door. And I sat with my back to the entrance, which is something that I've never done in my life, but today I did it for whatever reason. I just don't sit with my back to the door because it's always like, I got to be aware of what's going on. I need to know my entrance and my exit. And I've always been like that. So it's not a circumspect way of alluding to me being in the streets or anything like that. It's just what makes me more comfortable. So we're eating and just, talking about whatever. And halfway through, I look up and his eyes are bugged out. And he keeps looking up at the door. And he's getting nervous. And for this guy to get nervous worries me. I mean, granted, he's nervous about a lot of shit, but this was different. He was a worrywart to some extent, but this was different. And I point blank just look at him. What the fuck is wrong? He's like, listen, I don't want to alarm you. He said, but there's two guys out front that are watching us. But don't turn around. Well, you tell me don't turn around. What the fuck do you think I'm going to do? Of course I'm going to fucking turn around. But what I did was I knocked my fork off the table, went to pick it up, and then turned and looked. And that's when I see exactly what he's seeing. And at first I'm kind of like, yeah, just fucking, these guys were parked in a loading zone. Like if you're going to park, you pull it against the curb. But these guys are sitting out in the road. And I could see two guys looked very Albanian sitting in a BMW SUV. And I could see two guys sitting in the front seat. And they're not even parked. They're sitting adjacent to the parking lane, like a loading zone. And I thought they might be, waiting for a spot, but there was 100 spots open. And they're sitting there just staring at us. I just thought that, okay, maybe we're just looking too much into this, blah, 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 blah. But they kept staring. And that's when I just got that weird twinge. I said, something ain't right. And so reality immediately starts to kick in for me, and I'm scheming, how the fuck do we get out of here? What are we going to do? And so I start looking for the exit to the rear of the building because I figure, fuck it, we'll just go we're going to the bathroom, go out the back door, and we'll call our guys. And our guys will come heavy, and then we'll have a war or whatever it's going to be. But they don't have an exit. Because my worst scenario is these guys come in and start opening up. We're fucked. And he looks at me and goes, Jeff, you should go out there. And I looked at him and said, are you fucking out of your mind? Meanwhile, he's grabbing a fucking butter knife off the table like he's going to deflect bullets with a fucking butter knife. And he starts putting it in his lap. And to me, the whole entire thing was fucking pathetic. But like I said, I started to get that gut feeling. You know, that type of gut feeling that tells you something just is not fucking right. You can't place it. It's like an inner drive that tells you danger is here. Be aware of what's going on. And I wanted to ignore it badly, but I just couldn't. And he looks at me and goes, Jeff, seriously, they're watching us. Go outside and look. And like I said, you fucking nuts. I go out there, they start shooting. I'm going to get 10 feet before my brains are splattered all over the front of this building. And this wasn't the first rodeo that I had been in where there was a shooting taking place or could take place. A year before, I was living in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn. And three guys blew the head off a 17-year-old kid in broad daylight. And I was standing on the corner of Tompkins and Gates in Bed-Stuy, and when to my right, I see a kid coming up the block riding his bike. And I wasn't really paying attention, but I saw the kid. I just didn't think nothing of it. And I'm standing next to a brick building. And I end up, for whatever reason, lighting a cigarette and just move an inch to my left. And all of a sudden, the brick on the building starts exploding where my head just was. No bullshit. And everything at that point sort of went in slow motion for me. I could hear the cracking of the brick. I could feel the mortar of the brick shooting all over the place. And it sounded like fireworks going off. And so my adrenaline immediately kicked in. And for some reason, I ran to my left and dove in an alleyway adjacent to some stairs. And as I dove and smashed into the concrete, I could hear more gunshots. The next thing I heard, I'll never forget. And it was the voice of the kid on the bike screaming for his mom. He was begging for his mom to come and help him. And I must have waited a few more seconds, and eventually I got up in a frenzy to run into the building. A building. And I didn't get very far because I could see blood streaming on the pavement next to me. People began to filter out of the building to attend to this kid. And I figured it was safe, so I reached in my pocket for my phone, and I called my attorney, who was in the middle of a court proceeding. I told him I had just been shot at, and he told me that he was on his way. And I turned the corner a bit and could see the kid laying on his back, blood coming out of his mouth from underneath his armpit. He was clinging to life. Paramedics were called, and as they arrived, they just stood there staring at him. And everybody screaming at them, put the kid in a fucking ambulance, take him to Brooklyn Hospital, which was a couple blocks away. They did nothing for 7 minutes. They just let him die. And eventually they loaded him into the ambulance, but that was it. The NYPD was all over the scene, and the detectives were working the cameras on the corner, and they apparently saw the footage and saw I was the only one standing out there when the murder happened. And they hauled me into an office area of the building and began to question me. And I refused to say anything. My attorney shows up, tells the detectives he didn't see shit, he's got bad eyesight, and we got to go. You know? And I kept peering over my shoulder back to the Turkish restaurant. I keep kind of looking over my shoulder because now I'm getting paranoid. I can see the two guys in the BMW. And the curiosity got the best of me, so I grabbed my phone and I put the camera function on. I hit record and I walked out the front door. And as soon as I walked out towards the door, I held my phone down near my legs so that I could film without them seeing it. And I could take 100 photos every 10 seconds if I wanted to, just by holding the button. So if anything happened, at least I get a clear shot. And as I walked towards the door, the car began to move forward a little bit. So now they're almost even with me. And I would move a little bit to the left. They would move further to the right. I was trying to get a shot of their license plate, which I was able to do. So I would move to the left. They'd move to the right. I'd move to the left. They'd move to the right. Eventually, I was able to get a photograph of their license plate. I turn around and come back in. Now they've backed up. Now they're right in front of the door again. This is not normal. I got a decent photo of the side shot. They were Albanian, okay? Like I said, I went out again just because I thought my mind's playing tricks on me. As soon as I go out, they start to move forward to the perpendicular to me again. So they get a straight shot. That's what it is. And their hands aren't on the steering wheel. They're in their laps. I'm not stupid. And their eyes were focused straight ahead of them. Who doesn't turn when something in the periphery moves? They would turn and look. That's just natural. Their eyes were straight ahead. So like I said, I got photos of them from a side view and I got photos of their license plate. I go back into the restaurant. My attorney's nowhere to be found. I walk back in. I'm like, where the fuck? I asked the lady, where'd he go? And I thought he was in the bathroom, but he wasn't. He was hiding around the corner inside of the restaurant because he thought I was going to be shot. He would eventually come out of hiding, much to my agitation, let me tell you. We sat back down and I explained I got photos of the license plate number and his eyes opened wide and I immediately turned around and they had backed the car up to the original spot and are just deadpan looking at us. And we knew then, and I knew then, it's a setup. And he explained that the back door was locked. The only way out was the front door. And I told him I didn't think they would open up right in front of that store in broad daylight. I said, I don't think they're going to do that. And he didn't agree so much, but it was just a feeling I got. They're not too many witnesses. They're going to wait till we get in our car and they're going to pop us. That's what I thought. Especially since they've been sitting there 45 fucking minutes for the duration of our meal. And so I put together a plan. I said, here's what we're going to do. We're going to go outside. We're going to walk 20 feet to the left. We're going to get into your car. As soon as you start that fucking car, you're immediately going to do a U-turn. I don't give a fuck if there's a red light and just lay on the gas. We dropped our money, paid our bill. There's our plan. Now I could see the guy straight on. And I could see that both of them have their hands in their laps. And they're not moving around, and I figured they're trying to conceal weapons, right? So my attorney gets in the driver's seat, and I hopped in next door, or to the passenger side. And we could see them checking us out in the rearview mirror, which is a real bad sign. So my attorney pops the car into drive, and he just floors on the gas. And we cut off two other cars. So now we have two car lengths, right? And we noticed that BMW jets right in behind. But we're too slow. So there's at least two cars in between us. And we're sitting at a red light. I tell my attorney, as soon as the light turns green, flip a U-turn and floor it. And I figured as the light changed, and it wasn't a turn signal, but a yield light, it would give us enough time to get the fuck out of the area. The light turns green, he banks a U-turn, floors it, and then pulls in alongside of a curb not 10 feet away. Where do you think they pulled up? Right behind us. And I see him moving. I don't know why he pulled into a curb. I don't know why. So I started screaming at him, are you fucking out of your mind? Put the car in fucking drive or move over, let me fucking drive. Floor it now. They're going to fucking kill us, because I could see him jostling for the door handles and stuff like that. He just didn't get it, or he was just fucking scared. And before he could move, these guys then back up, come around, and then they park in front of us. And I'm like, oh, fuck. So I start screaming, get us the fuck out of here. He hits reverse, floors it, about hits somebody coming behind us. Then he goes around to the right. We pass them, and I see the guy reaching for something. Okay? And so I just scream, gun the fucking car. And he does. And we took off like a fucking bolt of lightning. And I think the average speed limit in Park Slope where we were at was 25. My attorney's going 70 miles an hour. Passing lights. But then he starts to slow down when the lights turn yellow. I said, what the fuck are you doing? I don't want to get a ticket. I said, we're going to be fucking killed. What do you not understand? I was pounding on, punching his leg so he'd keep hitting the gas. And they're right behind us. Every turn we make, they make. If we'd gun it, they'd gun it. Finally, I tell him not to give him any room beside us because they were trying to come up next to us. And I told him, because what they would do is they would pull out from behind, get to the left, they'd start to inch forward, and we would get lucky. There'd be somebody in front of them, and he'd floor it. I told him, the next time these motherfuckers get an inch of their bumper near your car, ram the car. Fuck them. Ram the goddamn car. Run them off the fucking road. Oh, I don't want to do that. We'll be killed. We'll be killed. And so we're going down Park Slope just at breakneck speed. And the BMW makes its move to the left-hand side. And I told my attorney, we have got a right turn coming up. Do not let off on the gas. I don't care if you flip this car 16 fucking times. Take immediate next right turn you can take. Do not let off the gas. So the next light's coming up. And I peer over my left shoulder and they're coming fast. And my attorney, thank God, yanks the steering wheel and nearly smashed into an oncoming car to the right-hand side of the road. And we made the turn at the exact last second you could make it. And I watch as the BMW goes shooting down straight and slamming on their brakes. All the smoke's coming from their fucking, coming from their wheels. And I tell my attorney, if you press the brake one time, we're going to be killed. Straight up. So he lets on the gas. Because remember, they've gone straight. They slam on their brakes. We hit the turn at like 50 miles an hour. Where car tilts. I thought we were going to get killed. And he just starts going through stop signs. Just non-stop. And meanwhile, I'm on the phone calling two guys who are in the area, asking them if they've got anything we can use because we don't know what's going on. They're like, give us your location and we'll get 5 or 6 cars out there and, we'll do what we got to do. But he just kept fucking going. Straight. Then finally I would tell him, take a right here. So I'm directing him where to go. He's like, no. We need to turn left. I said, that would be a 4 left. That's a fucking circle, asswipe. Go right. Go left, go straight, go right, go left. So we're slowly working our way through Brooklyn. And somehow we escaped that. Now, some of you are going to call bullshit, but just wait. This was not just a random incident. This was not just a mind playing tricks on us. This was a certifiable hit. 100%. And for whatever reason, these two bumbling fucking idiots had never done a hit before or they got nervous. Because if they were professionals, we never would have gotten to the car. We never would have been able to pull over to the curb and not gotten shot. And this was a nervous team, and it showed. And thankfully that day, we were on our toes and saw it coming. And like I said, for those that are going to say this story is made up and made to be more grandiose, let me finish by telling you this. We, at the time, had an inside guy, as far as like a private detective, former NYPD guy that get us all kinds of information on everybody, okay? I gave him the photos of the plate number, and that came back to Albanians in the Bronx. We sent a photo of the men to this investigator, and we also sent it to somebody else who verified these were the same 2 men in the same car who went to another mob informant's mother's house looking for him. This informant was the former son-in-law of John Riggy. His name was Sean Richards. And John Riggy was the former boss of the Cavalcante crime family. That informant had testified against Riggy, and the mob wanted him dead. And what makes it more creepy is the other informant that we talked about in the beginning of this at the court hearings. This informant and Sean Richards have been working together and living next door to each other in New Jersey. And they had business partners and they had a dust up. And this other informant of Albanian descent sent these 2 guys to hit him too. And we would later find out that the first informant was looking for the second address for the Sean Richards address, and it sent these assholes, same 2 guys looking for him. And it's not a stretch; it's facts. Facts. This guy hired 2 Albanian dipshits to wipe us out, and that's the God's honest truth. And a lot of people are going to say, well, did you guys call the FBI? No, we don't call cops. What happened was my attorney mentioned it on a radio show. And then he gets a call from the most disgraced FBI agent handler in history, Ted Otto. And Ted Otto hears this story and wants to talk to my attorney and to me about the situation. I said, fuck him. He's a fucking no way. He says, well, I'll make a call. I'm an attorney. I could talk to him. And this attorney was trying to talk him out of telling the story anymore. saying, oh, we were just confused. And that told me everything. It told me that Ted Otto, who was a handler for the feds and forced this Albanian jerk off, knew about what happened. And they were trying, because this guy was still an active informant, they didn't want this hitting the press because it would make his informant look incredibly bad in any trials that may or may not be coming up. And so that's the story of the Albanian hit that never was, or almost was, and the Mafia shit. And I don't think anybody's been through that. We also had feds follow us into Philadelphia from New York. Well, what they actually did was they were pretty slick. They followed us from New York, right? And they followed us to the Jersey line. Another FBI agent picked us up at the Jersey line. And then as soon as we got to the Pennsylvania line, a Philly FBI picked us up. And that's why we didn't go to our normal destination in South Philly, because we knew they were following us. We knew they were following us. We're not stupid. And that story and more is coming next week.